Hello and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I go over the week's events in the world of Scientology and what events there have been. It has been an interesting week and an interesting time to be a Scientology watcher. There's some interesting stuff going on as we roll into New Year's here. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Chris. How's your vacation going?
Good. It's this has been the only thing we've been doing really. I've done a couple little live streams with some people, but this has been a really nice time away, getting some space and some distance and definitely regrouping for 2024. I've got big plans. So thanks for asking. How's your holiday season going so far?
I'm only a little behind. I'm usually more behind by this point, so I'm optimistic that I'll be able to figure things out on time.
Excellent. Yeah, I share your optimism. So we have some things to go over. Now, first off is some sad news, and this really hit a lot of people pretty hard this week, and for completely understandable reasons. Doug Kramer passed away. He was a YouTube activist, exposer of Scientology's abuses, amongst other things. Tony, you knew him and worked with him, were interviewed by him. Comments?
Yeah, I mean, I knew him a little bit. He had interviewed me during the Danny Masterson trial. I actually had known him for a while before that. I featured one of his videos on my website about 2 years ago, and I just thought it was one of my favorite interviews during that trial. He was a great interviewer, a lot of fun. He asked, he had a different approach than most people. I think he was had a really intelligent approach on Scientology. He loved getting into the nuts and bolts of it. I know one of the things he did at his channel I thought was smart was he had people like Marcus Sawyer on, and they would talk about the absolute nuts and bolts of Dianetics and all that kind of thing. I really think he had a cool thing going. At one point, I think his channel had kind of gotten removed from YouTube and he had to fight back from nothing, which was amazing.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
he did that. So it's just somebody I was rooting for. I thought, and he did pay a lot of attention to the bunker and did his own versions of a lot of my stories and always gave me credit, which I thought was great. I really liked the take he had on my stories, and we would communicate about that behind the scenes. So very sad, sudden death. He was not he had apparently died some days before, but he was found Monday in his apartment, and apparently it was heart failure. And if you know his channel, you know that he was smoking through basically the entire time he was online. And apparently the according to the coroner, that was it. It was heart failure and the condition of smoking. So and only 50. I just felt really bad about that. And I've seen just a real outpouring from he had a lot of fans that really liked his approach.
Yeah, big time. I've heard the same. And of course, he and I, in terms of our work, cross over quite a bit because I get into a lot of that nuts and bolts. And I respect the hell out of anybody who is diving in that deep and really trying to deconstruct and figure this stuff out because Scientology is a deep well. And even, academics and professionals acknowledge that. There's a lot going on in Scientology and taking it all apart for people is a public service. And Doug was very, very dedicated to that. And we really lost him too soon. We don't need to be losing voices in this fight. So he will be missed. Um, okay, now next story here was actually a couple. There was a couple reports regarding this Jane Doe lawsuit. This is the Gavin Potter lawsuit. Is that right? And there's limited discovery now granted, but Scientology
Right.
is arguing against this. What is this all about?
Yeah, so this was the lawsuit where Jane Doe 1, who was one of the Danny Masterson victims, actually sued Scientology for something that happened quite a few years before the whole Danny Masterson thing, where she alleges that she was forced into marrying this Sea Org recruiter named Gavin Potter. And so basically, any interaction she had with him, she considered non-consensual.
Mm.
And it's a pretty serious lawsuit with some really awful allegations. And it suffered kind of an early, setback because Scientology, as usual, is trying to get it forced into religious arbitration. They claim that Jane Doe 1 signed a 2002 contract, which obliges her not to sue the church in court, but instead to submit her any grievance to Scientology's version of arbitration, which is not independent arbitration. It's outrageously unfair. And that and then not only did they move for that, but then they requested and got from the court a request to just put the lawsuit on hold until the judge can decide on that motion.
Right.
So that was the ruling a couple of weeks ago, where they'd be able to do nothing between now and February when that arbitration issue is going to come up.
Hmm.
What she did in response was say, okay, judge, but give us the right to do some limited discovery in the meantime to help us prepare for that fight. We need more information from Scientology about this contract, about their policies around those contracts, maybe even some depositions of some people. I've heard the name Julian Schwartz mentioned in court.
Oh,
And so
okay.
that could be very interesting. And the judge initially wrote a tentative ruling, said, yeah, she's entitled to that. And they had a hearing, and I had discussed with a reporter friend of mine in court. I said, now, when a judge does that, pretty much always just adopt it, right? Well, usually. But in this case, in Wednesday's hearing, the Scientology attorney, William Foreman, I guess, put on quite a show and was warning this judge that he was overstepping his bounds and that you're making decisions that really can't be made until after you've decided on the motion, blah, blah, blah. And the judge said, okay, well, I'm going to think about it. And even just that made me nervous. Sorry, I got a little
Mm,
cold. Um, even that made me a little nervous that the judge didn't just adopt his tentative ruling, but wanted some more time. Only took
mhm.
one more day, and then Thursday night he ruled that he will allow some limited discovery. Now I'm still waiting to see some details on exactly what he's going to allow, and I think that'll I'll be getting that fairly soon. But for now, the news is very good. Jane Doe 1 will have the right to get this evidence out of Scientology between now and February to prepare for that big showdown over whether her lawsuit should be forced into religious arbitration. So hopefully this increases the odds on her side.
Wow. Okay, got it. Well, I hope that I mean, I have no idea what the legal strictures are about in what I'm about to say, but it certainly seems that she would want to take advantage of the information that's come out about Valerie Haney's arbitration in order to show the judge, like, at this hearing. I don't know if that factors in. There's in terms of deposing, Julian Schwartz. Wow, that's wow, that would be awesome. If they could make that happen. I can't
You
help
you
but
make a
wonder.
great point. Why couldn't her attorneys one of the things I wrote about in my Daily Beast piece about Valerie was this filing that her attorneys made,
Mhm.
complaining that this isn't an arbitration. Scientology is just wasting Valerie's time. They're trying to intimidate her. They're calling her a liar. They're basically trying to harass her to the point she'll give up.
Yep.
Why couldn't Jane Doe 1's legal team take that document and bring it into court and say, see, judge, if you force Jane Doe 1's lawsuit into arbitration, it's going to be the same problem. They're just going to waste her time. They're not going to take this seriously. There have been so many things like that, Chris, over the last 10 years where there's so many things that just seem to make sense. Like, why can't somebody have an attorney with them in Scientology arbitration? Why can't
Right.
they bring in the evidence they want? And it's just we just keep running into these problems with the fact that because it's religious arbitration, Scientology gets to set all the rules. And these judges
Right.
just seem so quick to give up their own authority over these situations. But that's so, what you suggest makes a lot of sense to me, but I don't know if they're going to try that or not.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't even know if it's possible. But here's something happening in real time right now. That is the exact same kind of circumstance in terms of what Scientology is claiming they have the right to do. So bring it, as well as, of course, what happened with Luis Garcia, which was already a done deal. So, the kangaroo court is right there. And the
Yep,
fact
yep.
that, yeah, that they cover it up, won't allow phones, won't allow videography, won't allow a court reporter, no independent witnesses,
No
to
transcript.
are doing. No
No,
transcript.
yeah.
That's right. And that's, how can you possibly call a completely non-transparent process, fair and legal justice? It doesn't make sense at all. And the judges really, really, I will say again, I'm going to keep saying this. So, they need an education in coercive control. They don't get it. That's one of the reasons I know for sure that these cults like Scientology get away with this stuff in the courtroom is because the judges just have no idea what they're looking at. Okay. Um, Now, as far as some other stories you posted this week that were quite interesting in terms of, the kind of magnifying glass look into the world of the cult of Scientology. And the first one was the selling nostalgia, because of course it's the Christmas season, so out come the holidays catalogs from Scientology. What was the selling nostalgia thing about?
This was different, and I guess look, Scientology's hurting. They're
Mm.
hurting, and one of the things you know about when you look at Scientology over years is that so much of it stays the same. But recently, I've seen some new things that are kind of odd and make me wonder about what they're thinking about. So this was a small thing, but like you said, it caught our eye. It was interesting. They're now sending out these emails to Scientologists suggesting that they come to St. Hill in England, basically just to take a tour. And they're selling the idea that you can stand in the same spot where L. Ron Hubbard's lectern is and where he ran the original St. Hill special briefing course. We even have his list of the people in the very first day of the very first course, the attendance of who was in the room on that in L. Ron's handwriting on the lectern. And two things, it strikes me with two things. First of all, of course, I think about Mest, Scientology and Mest. They're selling these places and objects and stuff now, and they're not supposed to do that really. But
Yep.
also, it's interesting to me they're basically selling nostalgia for the St. Hill Special Briefing Course, which is a huge part of Scientology history. Hubbard's. This was what Hubbard was doing at St. Hill in the '60s when Scientology was absolutely at its height as far as Hubbard's, it was probably the golden age. I guess it had more people in the '90s, but anyway, the
Yeah.
important thing is this was an absolute key part of Hubbard's plan for creating auditors and spreading Scientology. And now they're asking people to come sort of like gaze on it and be nostalgic on it. And they're no longer giving the course.
Exactly.
I mean,
Exactly.
Chris, what do you think? Why doesn't this seem surprising to you?
Yes, it does. And it is surprising because it's only going to remind people of the fact that here's this, it is that okay, the St. Hill Special Briefing Course. We don't have to go to a huge long thing on this, but let me just tell you guys. It's the apex. It is the biggest, longest, most involved class that you can do in Scientology. And it is a graduate level, post-grad level class. It is a year long full time. If you do nothing else but this course, you're going to be on it for a year. It's about 470 lectures from Hubbard. It's all the books. It's thousands of pages of bulletins, and it's supposed to be a full chronological study of Dianetics and Scientology from beginning to end.
Mhm.
All the non-confidential stuff, everything that's not the OT levels or the secret stuff, is on this course, and they have not delivered it since the early 2000s when
Mhm.
David Miscavige put the kibosh on it and said, we're not doing this class until we go through and revise all this material and re-release it. And so this entire mid-section, you could say, has just been gutted out of this path to spiritual enlightenment and freedom called the Bridge to Total Freedom in Scientology.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
they literally have excavated out the very foundation on which this bridge is built.
Mhm.
That time period represents L. Ron Hubbard creating modern Scientology. All the framework, the auditing, the metering, the TRs, the processes, how they're run, the very bridge itself was all created at that time in the early 1960s, mid 1960s. So this is of great historical interest to Scientology, and it's also of fantastic interest to find out how David Miscavige possibly justifies gutting this thing for 20 years
Well,
now.
it's of historical interest, but
You
now
know?
it's a relic. They want you
Yeah,
to come and gaze upon the works of Hubbard, but not actually take part in them. I
that's
don't know.
right.
It just seems like kind of a
Yeah.
strange thing for them to be selling when, usually the emphasis is on, moving yourself up the bridge. You're not going to move up
Yeah.
the bridge if you just go look at his lectern, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. That's a good word for it, actually. I hadn't thought of it in that term, but you're absolutely right. They're selling relics. That's what they're doing now. You know? Wow. So, yeah, it's a little backwards world in Scientology these days. And to reinforce that, were two other write-ups from viewers or bunker contributors, Sonny Pereira and Bruce Hines, about different aspects of the Scientology experience. What were those on?
Yeah, so Sunny has talked in the past, she's written in the past about being disconnected from her mother and all the difficult things she's gone through. But I thought she had a fresh and interesting new take on it that, because it reminds me that Trisha Conley and I had just been talking about this
Right.
not too many weeks ago. That, okay, you've left Scientology, your parents decide to stay behind. This often happens. They're cut out of their lives, but you want to still have a family. And what does your parent always just keep saying to you? Go do the steps. Do the steps. What they mean is do the A to E steps that are required for you to get back in good standing with Scientology. And Trish herself was telling me that I can never do that. I'll never do that. And what Sunny did in her piece this week was to explain why so many people in that situation just cannot bring themselves to submit to Scientology and go through that humiliating procedure. And I thought
Yeah.
she did a really good job helping us understand what a terrible position that is that people find themselves. And it reminds me that Scientology disconnection is not just about separating people; it's
Yeah.
about humiliating and keep it's about power, it's about control.
That's
And
right.
so thank you, Sonny, for helping us understand that you must have known some people facing that situation too, right?
I faced that situation. I was doing the A to E steps in December 2013. My last effort to stay connected with Scientology and stay connected with, at the time, the woman that I loved and the whole situation I was trying to be part of was falling apart right in front of me. And the church said, "You've committed these suppressive acts. You've spoken publicly online against us." And I said, "Yeah, you're right. I did. I did all that. I was trying to mea culpa. I was trying to, like, make good." And they go, "Well, you got to do these A to E steps." And I was like, "Motherfucker. Okay, well, here we go." And it took me 3 weeks to get approval on the first step, which is simply saying I've been a bad guy, right? That the little write up for that went back and forth, and what was finally approved ended up being the exact opposite of what I started with. It was really bizarro world. And when you say humiliation, that clicked with me immediately, because that is what the process is all about. It is about you having to, what's the word? You have to
Grovel is the
your
word she
hands and knees.
used.
You have to grovel. Yes, you have to grovel. That's the
Yeah,
word.
yeah.
You literally do. They will not accept any other attitude. If you come at it with any point of pride, any point of sort of like, no, I still have a say here. Oh no, you don't. No, not at all. We're going to beat you down and beat you into submission. That's what these A to E steps are all about. And I only got through step A, before they declared me, and I was like, okay, fuck you guys, I'm out. So I've had my experience with that, and in all the years, this is interesting. In all the years that I was in Scientology, 27 years, I saw two people get successfully through all those steps and make it back into the church, and one
Wow.
of them for sure did it for family. The other one, I can't remember the specifics on it. I just knew it happened. So it is a groveling on your knees. You have to spend money, by the way. They're going to make you spend, even there, to get back in the good graces. And it's years. It's a years long process. I found out in the JWs and the Mormons and other groups that disfellowship or shun, the price of re-entry is very small compared to what Scientology puts you through. So even there, Scientology stands
I
out
have a
as.
I have a memory of talking to one person who was either thinking about going through it or starting to saying that it was going to cost them 15 grand.
Yeah,
And even then they didn't know if they'd really get the reconnection or anything. So
that's right.
it's incredible
Right.
amounts of money.
It's just horrifying. But it's always, it always comes back to the Benjamins, even
Yeah,
there.
of course, of
Comes
course.
back, always.
And then speaking of the Benjamins,
Yeah.
so Bruce sent in another, he has these wonderful vignettes of Sea Org life
Yep.
because he was at a high level and he saw a lot of different things. And this one was kind of goofy. There are commissions in Scientology, there are
Yep.
ways to make money. And
Yep.
he described how these two men in particular had kind of put themselves in a position where they could really get a lot of business going through their position with 10% and 15% commissions. The money racked up really quickly. And they were at
Yep.
the Flag Land Base, which is the money making capital of Scientology anyway. And so they were suddenly very flush. Well, what do you do with money when you're in a Sea Org in a dorm in Flag Land Base? And so they both bought red Corvettes.
Yep. Yep. Back then. Yep.
Oh
That was the
man,
thing.
I just love that. I love that whole idea. And then apparently they got in trouble for it and had to sell them or something. And so anyway, thank you, Bruce, for giving us another view on the ridiculous world inside Scientology.
Absolutely. Funny thing was, I actually ended up working with one of those guys
Oh,
in PAC. John Lundeen. He became the captain Asho Day back in in the 90s. And it's funny, he was the only one who survived out of this whole management reorganization that Miscavige did in 1996. He handpicked all these people to go be the new command teams for all the Sea Org bases, and John Lundeen was picked for Asho, and he's the only one who survived longer than I think about 3 years. By 3 years out, none of those people were still on their job except him. Somehow, right? Because he was a Sea Org vet. He'd been on the boat with Hubbard. He'd had his shellackings. But this stuff about the commissions and the money making in Scientology, this used to be a big deal. There were guys making hundreds of thousands as public Scientologists selling Scientology to other people. They were called professional FSMs. And but you could never let the staff or Sea Org get on board that, because their life is supposed to be a life of servitude and suffering. So, red Corvette, I don't think so, right? You guys got to sell those, you out ethic scumbags. So that's so he didn't have it when he came to PAC. I can tell you that. Okay. Well, those were the stories we wanted to go over this week. Like I said, pretty interesting look into Scientology's world this week. And I think we have some interesting stuff coming up on the horizon. Certainly the year in
we have
review.
a very big
Anything
week
else?
coming. We have a very big week coming starting today. I'm assuming you're going to put this out on Monday, right?
Yep. Yep.
So today, Monday, is the 70th birthday of the Church of Scientology. Please come to the bunker today at my Substack, and you will see all the birthday wishes that I've gathered from people. It's a lot of fun, including Chris, of course. And this is 70 years ago today. L. Ron Hubbard, his son Nibs, their wives, and one other couple took out incorporation papers in Camden, New Jersey, of all places, for a new entity called the Church of Scientology. Today is its birthday. Now, I know the church will tell you it started in February 1954 in Los Angeles, but to me, this is more important. This is the intention of the founder to create a Church of Scientology. It began 70 years ago today. So, hip, hip,
Wow.
hooray.
Yeah. Hip hip hooray indeed. Oh, 70 years. God damn. And we're gonna have a few more before this thing tanks. I am sure
Yeah,
of it.
yeah,
So, oh,
yeah.
we'll keep documenting it as it
Okay.
goes. All right.
Right.
All right, Tony, thank you very much for contributing this week. And folks out there, thank you very much for your support. Thank you for your viewership. And of course, if you are not subscribed to Tony's Substack, the address is right there on the screen. And I highly recommend you check it out. Get yourself on the notifications so every day you are hearing the news as we're hearing it and reporting it. And on that, I will see you guys next week. Bye bye.